This is episode 95 of Changing the Face of Yoga. And I have a guest who will discuss lower back pain and how yoga has benefits for that. Her name is Jo Pineau, and let's listen. Hello, and welcome to Change the Face of Yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies. I'm very excited to be talking to lots of yoga teachers who will explain their passion for teaching yoga to students with different ages, physical fitness levels, wellness levels, and different goals. They will explain the benefits of yoga for these students and will be including teacher tips and pose modifications. I am Stephanie Cunningham of Yoga Lightness, and I've been teaching over 50s for 10 years. So this area is my passion and the passion of many other yoga teachers that you will be listening to in this series. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. Hello, this is Changing the Face of Yoga, and I have a great guest today. Her name is Joanne Pineau, and Joanne is focusing her efforts as a yoga teacher and a yoga therapist on low back pain. And I know that that's really epidemic among many of us, so I think it'll be a really helpful and interesting podcast. And she has an interesting bio. She started in 1998 in Ontario, Canada, teaching at a senior center with no training or certification. She was self-taught and wanted to teach it. Since then, she's accumulated thousands of hours of training and experience teaching yoga to all ages and physical conditions. In 2017, she was accredited by the International Association of Yoga Therapists as a certified yoga therapist after documenting over 700 hours of client contact hours since 2007 and presenting 22 case studies, as well as meeting other requirements. In the last 5 years, she's decided to specialize in low back pain and sciatica after many years of experiencing low back pain herself. Through independent study and some additional training, she developed a 2-hour workshop for sciatica, which evolved into an 8-week series of classes. And she also published a manual called Stop Sciatic Pain in 2000, available on Amazon. Welcome, Joanne. And
hi, thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, that pretty well covers everything, I think.
Okay, great. I'm glad. I thought it was interesting that you went through a documentation process to get your certification for yoga therapist. Is that an unusual one? I mean, there's a lot of courses for yoga therapy, but you actually did it through experiential, shall we say?
I did, because there was so much time, but when the International Association of Yoga Therapists decided to offer this kind of accreditation, they knew that many of us had been teaching for years and have years of experience, just with our own personal experience and with working with students and individuals and clients and so on. So they offered an opportunity for us who've been in the business, in the profession for a long time already, to be grandparented into accreditation. So that's why I had to go through that process of providing evidence that's why I had to go through that process, is to be grandparented in. And they only had so much time. I think they gave us 3 or 4 years. And we had to apply. And then once we were accredited, I think last year, 2017, or 2 years ago, that was the limit. You had up until 2017 to be grandparented into the accreditation. And then from then on, you have to get your accreditation through accredited schools.
Okay. Well, I just thought that was really interesting. To present 22 case studies is quite a body of work. To be able to do that, I was very impressed. So you say that you've specialized in low back pain and sciatica, and you've been experiencing this for many years yourself, and you found that certain ways of yoga are helpful to you?
Well, that's right. Well, I'll give you a little backstory. I started having back issues actually as a teenager, but it was just mostly, if I didn't exercise or if I wasn't active for a while, I would start feeling back issues. So I quickly found out as a teenager that if I did more walking and if I was more active, I wouldn't have any back issues. So that's kind of where it began. Then as I became an adult and had children, and I also ran a dog boarding kennel, and I had a yoga studio, I had all this. I was very busy, and I was a chartered herbalist as well as at the time, and I was working in the garden a lot. I developed more severe back issues. And I also did my yoga teacher training in 2002. And even after that training, it just didn't really help me understand what to do for my low back. The training wasn't there for that, for that specialty, if you will, for that area of concern. And so I had to start researching. I had to find my own solutions. Like, that's how I am. When I have a problem, I look out and I see what can I do to help myself? How can I resolve this problems? I read books, and then I went to see a chiropractor, and that helped for very little. It helped a little bit, somewhat, but it didn't really resolve the issue. So then I looked into massage, and I looked into somatics yoga, and then I looked into, it was just starting, in 2003, 2004. I was just beginning to find intensives or training for yoga teachers that focus more on health concerns, because that was a relatively new thing. For a while, there was just yoga for everyone, and there was really no specific training for specific body condition, not in Canada anywhere, or where I live in Ontario, that wasn't there. That still wasn't really resolving the issue, so it really wasn't helping me. It was giving me some ideas of what to do, but it wasn't really clearing the problem. I started looking at somatics yoga and Feldenkreis. Interesting enough, there's a yoga studio right beside the Feldenkreis Center in Toronto. And I went to both, and I had some training in Feldenkreis, and I found, wow, this is really doing something for me. This is really starting to help me, and I'm really beginning to feel like I'm getting somewhere with this low back issue. And so I just continued some independent study with Feldenkreis. I didn't become trained as a Feldenkreis practitioner, but I learned a lot through their different trainings, their intensives for just a lay person, and through my reading and independent study. And from there, I also looked in somatics yoga, which is very similar to Feldenkreis. And that was starting to help. And especially after while working at the senior center, they were all older than me, and they had specific body conditions as well that they needed to be attended to. And again, yoga was just too generalized and was just too vanilla, I guess. I didn't know what to do to help these individuals other than tell them to stop moving if it hurts, or come out of the pose if it hurts, or try this instead, do a different pose. That was as far as I could go with them. So that's gradually how I began to understand more what I needed to do for myself and for my students.
So you actually really are focusing down to this specific area early in the morning, guys. And it sounds like you've really pulled together all of these different modalities to help. Why these specific ones? I know you said Feldenkrais actually gave you some help personally.
Yeah, that's where it really started to feel like I'm onto something here. And later on, many years later, when I took some Viniyoga training, I thought, wow, this is so similar to Feldenkrais, where it's body awareness through movement. And Viniyoga is very much movement, contracting and strengthening. It's based on proprioceptive neuromuscular training, or facilitation, PNF. The idea that you stretch and strengthen, that contracting and lengthening of the muscles really helps to tone the muscles and release the tension in the muscles. And I think that's what I was experiencing with the Feldenkrais. So later on, I thought, okay, there is a yoga connection, if you will, to this methodology. And I don't know where that came from. I believe it comes from physiotherapy in 1940s or 50s, where they developed the PNF approach. But anyway, yeah, so it's through there, and everything I learned, I put into practice in my seniors class. I was so comfortable with them that as a new teacher, and I was so comfortable with them that they would be my guinea pigs, if you will.
I see. Okay.
And I would practice on them. I would say, okay, let's do this and let's do that. And as you turn your head, move your arm, and they loved it. They loved it. And so it made yoga more accessible to them as well. And I saw how they improved and so on. So I just continued in that vein. And over time, I actually came across a program that was offered from the Viniyoga perspective. The program is called the Essential Low Back Program. It was written by Robin Rothenburg. This program is actually based on 2 studies that was funded through the National Institutes of Health. And I think it might have been around 2006, around that time. I'm not really sure exactly, but it was back then, where they were just they were selling the program as a manual illustrated manual with 6, at the time, CDs, 5 CDs. So I guess that was 2006 or so. And I bought the program and I thought, wow, okay, that's where I saw the connection between what I was learning in Feldenkreis and Viniyoga. I thought, well, this is working for me. So it's that movement, that PNF approach that was really working. And from there, I actually did the training with Robin. I went to her and I took the training to become certified to teach that program. And I just continued to learn. From here, most recently, I took the Gokhale method for primal posture course, and I also studied, Dr. Stuart McGill is very big in Ontario. I don't know if you know him. He's actually internationally renowned, but he's really huge in this profession where he works with many athletes, world-renowned athletes, and their low back pain. And so he's really an expert in pain rehabilitation. And so I studied some of his materials as well, and instructional videos and so on. And I put it all together and I see some similarities between all these modalities and the low back and what causes low back pain. So really come to understand what I feel. I've come to understand, or have a better understanding than I've ever had of what it takes to heal back pain. And it's extended into sciatica as well, because I did experience that at one time. And then I developed a workshop because I found out what I needed to do, and I did it, and I was able to. So from there, I thought I'll share it. And so I developed a 2-hour workshop, and then it became classes. And I found that it's helpful. I was able to help these people. So it's based on several years of working with individuals one-on-one, but also in small groups and noticing what works and what doesn't work. And all this research and independent study, and learning more about the Viniyoga approach that's really helped the people that I work with.
Okay, great. I love this kind of research at the coal face, where you're actually trying things and working with individuals or small groups and figuring out what works. I think that's a really great way to do yoga, as well as to just expand your own expertise. So I congratulate you on that. You said that you learned what causes low back pain. What are the major causes of low back pain?
Well, the most people I see is generally what's being affected in the back is the low back area and the neck, but the low back at the L5S1, just because the low back is very vulnerable to excessive wear and tear, because like for the thoracic spine, for example, the spinal column has some support from the rib cage. So there's less mobility in the thoracic spine, so there's fewer injuries and back issues in that area, although there still are, there's fewer. And it's the neck and the low back that's most vulnerable to excessive movement. It's like a piece of plastic that we keep folding and bending and folding and bending, and then eventually we weaken that plastic. It's kind of like that with the low back. And so very often I'll see bulging discs, and not herniations where the membrane itself of the disc is torn or broken. That causes acute pain and needs a special care. I couldn't work with someone like that. They would be in too much pain. Send them to the hospital and they'd need a specialist to work with. But for bulging disc where the membrane of the spinal disc is still intact, that I can work with. For most people that come and see me, they're usually in mild or moderate pain. I wouldn't see someone in severe pain, of course. And in moderate or mild pain, oftentimes there are many things we can do for that person. So, but that's not the only cause. So very often it's a bulging disc just from too much forward bending in most cases. The odd time it's the facet joints on the other side. It's the facet joints from back bending in a certain way, or from twisting too much twisting to one side all the time. So it's that repetitive movement that causes most of the back issues, repetitive movement over time. For example, myself in the garden and bent over with a rounded spine all those hours every day for years. After a while, it's like that piece of plastic. It wears and tears happen, in the spinal column. So that's part of it. That's a big part of it. And the slouching, years and years of slouching. Now that we have all these devices, we're slouched even more.
Yes.
Over our devices and such. So I'm seeing more and more individuals with issues in their upper back and neck too. So slouching hasn't helped at all as well. It's caused part of the issue. So what it does is when we slouch, it puts more load on the spinal discs, and then over time, it just kind of weakens it all. So for healing, most of these individuals need to perform more axial extension, like lengthening through the spine is very important. Improving their posture is very important, not just by standing straight, because that never works. You get tired holding yourself up. You actually need to build the musculature in your back to help support that more upright position. And then there's a specific position of the L5, S1, that's the lowest vertebrae, and then the one that's just at the pelvic rim. That one too, it needs to be slight anterior tilt of the pelvis. It needs to be the lumbosacral vertebrae needs to be in a specific sweet spot for most. So either we overback, we have too much of a low back curve, or we don't have enough. So we need to find that sweet spot, and that's the healthiest position for that area. So there's a lot that can be done. That's just a lot of, but you need to take the time to learn it. I mean, a lot of people come to me saying, wow, this is so simple, but they didn't know it. They didn't know they had to do it. So that's the issue, really.
You say that most of your clients and students are usually over 50, and that you teach either small classes or individuals. I kind of got the impression from what I read on your website that you kind of have a continuum of people who have kind of non-specific, maybe mild back pain, all the way up to more specific issues that are in more pain, that you tend to use, if I'm correct. Yeah. You teach them individually. So how is you just do an intake or talk to them about where they might fit in your continuum of care?
When they first contact me, they don't really know what I can do for them. And so they usually say, I want to take your low back program because it's for the low back. And then I'll need to talk to them. I have to ask them some questions, because even though that's a great program for the low back, it's not for everybody. And so I'll have to, ask them a few more questions, like, have you seen a doctor? Have you been diagnosed? Do you know what the issue really is? And then I'll talk to them and see, if they say, it's just my muscles are tight. Mm-hmm. No, I don't have any herniation. My doctor says my spine is fine. Then I'll say, okay, I think the low back program will be fine for you. If they say, well, I have a bulging disc and forward bends hurt, and then I'll often say, okay, I can modify that program, or I can see you individually. I can see you one-on-one individually and teach you the program and modify it so that you're not doing the forward bends. You're not doing what aggravates the condition. Or I'll say, or we can just do one-on-one, and I'll prescribe the exercises and what you need to do as we go, and we'll modify as you improve. So I have to ask them some questions and explore it first on the phone. And then when I see them, I do an intake. I ask them further questions, because often they don't reveal everything. And I later find out they have a hip issue, or they've had a knee replacement, or, so I need to really understand what I'm working with so I can better suggest what they need to do.
Okay. You made a statement on your form that I got, and I thought it was very interesting. And you say, you want to ask teachers to consider this. We are teaching a 21st century body and mind, a practice that was designed thousands of years ago. A practice designed to prepare the body for meditation and for thin male figures. The spine itself has changed shape in the last century alone, and we have become much more stationary. Students come to class stressed and with rounded shoulders and stiff backs. Are deep back bends like wheel or cobra really necessary or even helpful? And although I think that's an important question to talk about, I'd like to know what you mean by the spine itself has changed shape in the last century.
It's very interesting because Esther Gokhale, who developed the Gokhale method, she did a lot of research when she herself was a young mother. She had had spinal fusion, and the pain was still there after she had had the operation. So she did some intense research. And she has two pictures, one of a 1900 or close to 1900 spine, a drawing in an anatomy book of the spine, which is almost more like a J shape. It still has a natural curves, but almost like a J shape, where the L5 S1 is the hook of the J. And then the one of an older spine, an earlier, like a more recent anatomy book, which is almost like an S shape, with deeper curves throughout the whole spine. So she makes a really good case for the evolvement of the spine, how it's changed over time. And one of the things she mentions is that in 1940, 1950, and she demonstrates this with pictures as well, the fashion industry changed and slouching became popular after World War II. So, so slouching became popular. And the furniture changed as well. So there's less support for our spine, for the back. And that started the whole process of changing the shape of our spine. That's what she does. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what I get out of it. And it's really interesting. I really get that. And you see it in people. You see people with really their big lordosis in their low back, or flat backs, flat low back, or their head is projected forward instead of, the ears above the shoulders in line with the rest of the body. And you see the curves in the spine, how they're exaggerated. And as soon as I teach them some of the sitting posture, what I've learned from the Gokhale method, they just right away, they say, I have no pain. Oh, this feels strange, but it feels good. It's just that alignment into more of a J-shaped curve, if you will, is healing for the body. Not only does it engage the spinal erector muscles and the rhomboids and everything, which are the muscles that are supposed to be engaged when you're sitting and standing, but it also strengthens them because they're being used in that way, and it's easy, it's effortless. And so I think we need to reconsider what we're teaching our students. If these people come to class and, like I said, they're on their devices, they're in that forward hunched position most of the time, or a lot of the time during their day, and then we come to class and we ask them to do a deep back bend. Well, are they really going to be able to come into that back bend without proper preparation? And that's the other thing. Are the teachers preparing them for the deeper back bends? Doing a lot of postures, to open up the chest, to relax the shoulders, to release the tension in their front, to strengthen their back muscles, and all that needs to be done before they come into back bend. And are these bodies actually ready, and do they actually need that? Maybe they need a little less deep bends, and maybe a more gentle approach to loosen up what's tight and strengthen what's loose, that sort of thing. So that's my idea. That's what I'm thinking of. And we're teaching forward bends. I still hear this where teachers are telling their students to roll out from standing. And what we're asking the students to do is to lift the upper part of their body, but we're not engaging the back muscles to lift the front part of the body, which are all the organs and glands and abdomen, and everything is in the front. And we're asking our spinal column to lift that without any adequate engagement of the muscles that attach the spinal column. And so we need to stop teaching people to roll up from standing. It's causing more issues in the spine.
Yeah. Okay. Can I just go back to this J? It looks like to me is that it's almost straight until we get the little bit of the curve at the bottom in the low back. Is that what you mean by a J shape?
That's what I mean, yes. So the thoracic spine and the cervical spine, or the neck and the upper back, are almost straight. There's spine curve in there because we need that. Part of it is needed, but they're not exaggerated like the S shape that we now see.
Okay.
And back issues, she makes a case that back issues worsened after that time. Like there were fewer, I guess documented, as far as documentation goes, there's more cases of back issues now than ever. Part of that has to do with the shape of our spine and how we're holding ourselves or standing.
I think it's fascinating that the furniture changed too. So you have a chance, did we? we started slouching and the furniture changed, so no wonder the backs hurt. Okay.
Well, you see babies as well, they're in their bucket seats, so the spine is rounded. Yeah, there's pictures from children and adults from all over the world, and it's really just in our culture, in our American, Canadian culture, maybe in Australia, I don't really know. In parts of the world, there's no back issues. Parts of the world where they balance things on their head, and they have this nice J-shaped form in their spine, and they're balancing heavy objects on their head. They have no back issues. and they're squatting to do the work. They're not sitting on furniture, they're squatting. And again, they have this nice tall spine and they have no back issues. And then we're having our children in these bucket seats and we're holding them with a rounded low back. And so changes are happening on a neuromuscular level as they get older. And as they get older, they form that's the shape of their spine. It's a more rounded lower back. And it's just really interesting. So it's on a neuromuscular level that is changing.
Wow.
On how they're being carried and the furniture that we're using.
Yeah, it is interesting. It really is. You say that, you do some work with your students and they say, oh, this feels so strange, but it feels so good. So what exactly are you doing to kind of bring back that J shape?
Okay, so the first thing is I am helping them strengthen their back. So that's something that new to me as well. I don't know how many teachers have been taught to strengthen the back side. We do Cobra to stretch the front, but we're not engaging the back muscles. So one of them is using Cobra in a different way to strengthen the back muscles. So instead of coming up high and straightening the arms and pushing off with the hands, for example, instead of modifying it to strengthen the back muscles, this is very much the Viniyoga approach, where you're laying on your stomach and your elbows are on the floor and you're not using your arms to push down at all. Instead, you're using your back muscles. So you're lifting your chest, your head comes up as well, but you don't worry about the height. What you want to do is engage all the muscles along the spine from the base of the skull to the pelvis. So first, that's one of the things I'm doing is strengthening their backside, and then they're still getting that nice stretch across the front. And the other thing I'm doing is teaching them some of what I learned through the Gokhale method of sitting, with where you pull. Actually, I actually, before I learned about the Gokhale method, Iyengar classes for many years. And one of the things that they would have us do when we're sitting on the floor is pull the buttocks back slightly so we get an anterior tilt of the pelvis. So even there was some awareness of the spinal alignment. So, well, there is in Iyengar especially. So you have that pelvic anterior tilt of the pelvis, and then the rest of the spine is like stack sitting, where the rest of the spine follows upwards. So that's part of it, is just finding the sweet spot. Now, there's no specific degree of angle there, but the pelvis should be slightly tilted forward. And you have to find the sweet spot. How far tilted forward, it depends on the individual. And then once you have that, you can let the weight of your body rest over your sitting bones, and then the rest of the spine aligns above it. That is really nice. Yeah.
Feels good, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this has really been fascinating. I don't actually have low back pain, but I have had a lot of students that do. So is there anything that you would like to add to our discussion that we either haven't covered or haven't covered in enough depth?
Well, the students in general know what feels good and what doesn't. And then I would say, I'd ask them in a general yoga class, I don't know, it depends on the training that the teachers had and how big the group is. But if you have an opportunity to talk to the student who complains about a back issue and just ask them a few questions like, does it hurt when you bend forward? Does it hurt when you bend back? What feels good? What doesn't feel good? And please come out of a pose if it doesn't feel good. And often you say that and they do it anyway.
Yeah.
So my approach would be to start with really gentle movements or really gentle postures, simple ones, and notice how students move. And then from there, you can decide, okay, how far do I want to go with these postures in this class? Because it also takes students who are self-aware, and also takes students who are not afraid to come out of a posture if it's not working for them. And generally, most students, we don't want to stand out, and so we want to do what the teacher tells us to do. So I would start that way. I would take charge and decide for them, okay, I can see that this is not working for them. I'm going to take everyone out of the posture and maybe do something, back up a bit, maybe do something simpler, just that kind of thing. Just take a little more responsibility for the students in your class and not assume that even though we ask them to come out of a posture, if it hurts or if it doesn't feel good, don't assume that they will. Just approach it with a little more care.
I agree. You say here's some modifications, and they'll always take the most difficult one. And
They really do.
yeah, you're going, no, it's okay. You can choose anything you want. It's up to you. Oh, well.
Yeah. So I think we need to just decide, okay, we're going to start easy, and we just do it. We start with the easy. I had one teacher who said to me that she taught her whole class. This was for cancer and heart disease. And she said she taught her whole class sitting in a chair. And one day the student saw another teacher sitting on the floor cross-legged, and she was so impressed by that teacher. And she didn't realize that the teacher in the chair could also do it.
Yes.
But the reason she sat in the chair was that the students would sit in the chair as well,
Yeah.
It was kind of funny.
Okay, great. Well, Joanne, this has just been really interesting and really great. I think you kind of epitomized the person takes a lot of different information and is able to synthesize it into a workable class. And that's quite skill, I think, to be able to do that. So I want to really thank you for coming on the podcast. I want people to have your contact details in case they'd like to talk to you. Her email is joanne@innerjourney.ca, and inner is capitalized as is journey. The website is www.innerjourney.ca. Her Facebook is Sciatic Pain 101, and another one is innerjourney.ca. And
the face one is Inner Journey Yoga Therapy.
Oh, is it? Okay. Okay. Yoga therapy. For the show notes. And I don't have an Instagram. So I just want to thank you, Joanne. I think it was really fascinating. I had never really thought about, especially this J and S stuff and how things changed in the 50s is really telling us why we might have all these problems now. And I think it's a really good piece of information for everybody.
I think so too. Esther Gokhale developed this method. She has a book, and I strongly recommend that that everyone reads it. It's very fascinating. It's fascinating the research that she's done on the shape of the spine and its involvement and its impact on back pain. Really interesting information.
Okay. I will put this in the show notes, but for those of you that are listening, Gokhale is spelled Gokhale, and she has a method course on primal posture. Just so you'll know how to get a hold of it if you don't want to read the show notes, which I don't recommend.
Oh, the book itself? I'm not trying to promote the book. Like I have no I don't have any money. Like nothing will come to me promoting. But I learned so much from her that I think it's well worth the read. And her book, the title of the book is 8 Steps to Pain-Free Back.
Okay, 8 Steps to Pain-Free Back. Yes. And I think so many of us in yoga run into people with pain. And so I think this is excellent resource for people. So I'll put that in the show notes too. Thanks, Joanne. I really appreciate you. It was great.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it. Thank you, Stephanie, very much for calling me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful interview. If you would like to be a guest on Changing the Face of Yoga, please go to my website, www.yogalightness.com.au, and under the Changing the Face of Yoga tab, you can complete Be Our Guest form. After reviewing the form and finding it applicable to this podcast, we will send you a link to schedule an interview. Please download, review, and tell your friends of any podcasts that are of interest to you and to them. If you would like to contact me, send an email to info@yogalightness.com.au. And thank you for listening to Changing the Face of Yoga.